The short-lived Big South regular season came to an end on Saturday with an exciting final weekend. First, in just the second winner-take-all championship game in conference history, Kennesaw State downed Monmouth 52-21 to win their first ever league title. The Hawks scored first 7 minutes into the game, but the rest of the way it was all Chandler Burks and the Owls. Burks capped off his stellar regular season by earning Stats FCS Offensive Player of the Week and his fourth Offensive Player of the Week award in the Big South. The redshirt junior quarterback was 6 for 8 for 114 yards and a score through the air, and added 131 yards on 20 carries and 4 scores on the ground. As a team, the Owls finished with over 400 rushing yards. It was a rough day for the Monmouth offense as Kennesaw's defense forced 5 turnovers, including 2 interceptions. The defense was led by redshirt freshman Bryson Armstrong, who recorded 10 tackles, 8 solo, 1.5 tackles for a loss, and 1 sack. He also had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery to earn Conference Defensive Player of the Week. Peter Guerrero was the lone bright spot on offense for the Hawks. He finished with 141 rushing yards on 19 carries and found the end zone twice. With their win, Kennesaw State earned the Big South's automatic bid into the FCS playoffs, and Monmouth will join them as they received an at-large bid. Charleston Southern needed a fourth-quarter comeback and a last-second field goal to knock off Liberty and finish over 500 in conference play. After trailing 16-7 to start the final quarter, the Bucks took a 1-point lead with under 7 to play. Alex Probert put the Flames back on top with just over a minute left, but the Bucks drove down the field and set up Tyler Tekic for a game-winning 42-yard field goal in the final seconds. Tekic's efforts earned him Conference Special Teams Player of the Week. For Liberty, Stephen Calvert threw for 255 yards and 2 scores. Both scores went to Antonio Gandy Golden, who finished the day with 10 catches for 113 yards. In the Big South's battle of 0-4 teams, Presbyterian defeated Garner-Webb 31-21 to avoid a winless conference season. The Blue Hose put the game away when Ben Cheek found the end zone on a 46-yard run with 3.5 minutes left to go up 17. Cheek finished the day a perfect 8 for 8 through the air with 122 yards. He added 96 yards on 11 carries on the ground with 3 scores. Freshman running back Torrance Marble rushed for 186 yards and a score on 16 carries, earning his third Conference Rookie of the Week award. For the Bulldogs, Tyrell Maxwell accounted for all 3 touchdowns. He completed 17 of his 33 passes for 169 yards and 1 score, while his other 2 came on the ground, where he tallied 175 yards on 20 carries. Now let's take a look at the final Big South standings. Number 18, Kennesaw State, sits alone at top after a perfect conference season. Monmouth is right behind them at 4-1. Charleston Southern is 3-2. Liberty finishes in 4th at 2-3. Presbyterian finishes 1-4, and Garner-Webb finishes at the bottom with an 0-5 record. Now up to 18th in the most recent Stats FCS Top 25, 10-1 Kennesaw State will host number 14 Sanford in the first round of the FCS playoffs. The Bulldogs are 8-3, and this is a rematch from opening day. Back on August 31st, Sanford handed the Owls their only loss of the season, winning 28-23. The Owls struggled to defend the pass in that one and allowed Devlin Hodges to throw for 241 yards and 4 scores. Their defense has significantly improved since that defeat, as they are the best in the nation at forcing turnovers. They forced 32 turnovers, including an FCS best 21 interceptions. Their plus 23 turnover margin is also the best in the FCS. Kennesaw should be able to run all over the Bulldogs' defense in this one, as they bring in the nation's best rushing attack against the Sanford defense that's 95th against the run. For Monmouth, their loss to Kennesaw didn't end their season. They finished 9-2 and received an at-large bid into the FCS playoffs. They will travel to number 20 Northern Iowa and play the 7-4 Panthers. The Hawks' offense turned the ball over 5 times in their loss to Kennesaw last week, and if they want to avoid a 2-game losing streak to end the season, they're going to have to do a better job protecting the ball. Monmouth had one of the most well-rounded offenses in the Big South this year, and will need to rely on that balance if they want to win on the road. Now it's time to hand out some yearly awards. First, the Big South Rookie of the Year award, and I couldn't give it to just one guy. The co-rookies of the year are running backs Torrance Marble from Presbyterian and Peter Guerrero of Monmouth. The duo finished 1-2 in the league in rushing yards and were the only 2 rushers in the conference to go over 1,000 yards. They combined for 5 Rookie of the Week awards, Marable with 3 and Guerrero with 2. On to the Defensive Player of the Year, and that's Kennesaw State redshirt freshman linebacker Bryson Armstrong. Armstrong finished the year with 82 tackles, 10.5 tackles for a loss, a Big South record 10 sacks. He forced 3 fumbles, he had 3 interceptions, and had 4 fumble recoveries. Armstrong was the league's Defensive Player of the Week and Rookie of the Week twice. Now on to the big award, Offensive Player of the Year. And this one's going to Kennesaw also. Redshirt junior quarterback Chandler Burks is the most deserving of this award. He led Kennesaw to 10 straight wins, an undefeated conference season, and their first ever Big South title. He was the Big South Offensive Player of the Week 4 times and finished the season with 912 yards on the ground, a conference best 15 rushing touchdowns. He also added over 1,000 yards and 6 scores through the air. That's all for the Big South. For the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm Frank LaSala.
A historic week for the Ancient Eight. As the season comes to a close, we saw records broken, streaks stopped, and a champion emerged. Now to start things off, we saw Brown travel to New York to take on Columbia, with this being their last chance at beating an Ivy League opponent until next year. Things didn't go exactly as planned for the Bears, as they were dominated on both sides of the ball. Columbia's defense held them to only 6 points in the contest, while on offense, led by receiver Josh Wainwright, who grabbed a career-high 13 receptions for 127 yards and a touchdown, the Lions were able to put up 24 points on the Bears. With this performance, Wainwright set Columbia's single-season record for receiving yards with 1,001 yards. Columbia finishes the season with a nice 24-6 victory over Brown to end the season. Next up, we saw a tight one between Penn and Cornell. Both teams stepped onto the field looking to break the 3-way tie for 3rd place in the Ivy League and finished the season with winning conference records. This game went back and forth right up to the very end as the lead changed 5 times throughout. But with just over 2 minutes left to play in the game, Penn running back Trey Solomon ran the ball in from the 3-yard line to go for the go-ahead touchdown. Penn would convert on a 2-point conversion right after that to put themselves up 29-22. Which is how the game would stay, as Penn would take this one and finish the season on a high note. After that, we saw Dartmouth clash with Princeton in what turned out to be a shootout in New Hampshire. We saw some huge performances in this game by both teams, starting with Princeton quarterback Chad Kanoff, who threw for 444 yards, 3 touchdowns on 37 of 46 attempts. As for Dartmouth, we saw backup quarterback Jared Gerbino carry the ball 32 times for 202 yards and 4 touchdowns, all of which were career highs for him. Gerbino's effort proved to be the difference maker as the last touchdown came on a 2-yard run with no time left to give Dartmouth the final lead of the game. Princeton would fumble the ensuing kickoff, leading to a meaningless fumble recovery touchdown on the last play of the game, which set up its final score of Dartmouth 54, Princeton 44. Finally, we saw Yale take on Harvard at the Yale Bowl. Yale came into this game knowing that if they won, they would be the outright Ivy League champions for the first time in 37 years. In front of a crowd of just over 51,000 fans, Yale did just that. They dominated Harvard on the defensive end. Aside from allowing a field goal on the opening drive, they completely shut Harvard down. Yale took this one 24-3, beating Harvard at the Yale Bowl for the first time since 1999, and at the same time clinching the Ivy League title. Also with this win, Yale becomes the first and only Ivy League team this season to crack the FCS Top 25. This season, they finished the year ranked as the 24th team in the nation. And for the last time this year, let's take a look at the standings in the Ivy League. As we just mentioned, Yale sits alone at the top of the conference as the champions, finishing with a 9-1 record on the season. Right after them, we see 2 teams tied for 2nd place with 8-2 records on the year. If Yale had lost this game to Harvard, there would have been a 3-way tie for the title in the Ivy League since Dartmouth beat Yale earlier this season and Columbia beat Dartmouth earlier as well. In 3rd place, we see Penn, boasting a 6-4 record on the year after starting off the year at 2-4. Behind them, we have Cornell and Harvard, who both finished 3-4 on the year in conference play. Even though Cornell has a worse overall record, they defeated Harvard earlier in the year to allow themselves to be tied with Harvard in the standings. Below those 2 teams, we have Princeton, who rounded out the year at 5-5, but all 5 of those losses came to Ivy League teams, which resulted in their low placement for the season. Finally, rounding out the conference are the Brown Bears. They finished the season at 2-8, with an 0-7 conference record resulting in a last-place finish. Unfortunately, since the Ivy League does not play in the FCS playoffs, this is the last time we will get to see these teams play until next season. So for one final time, for Football Game Plan's FCS Whip Around, I'm Ian Gridley, and I'll see you next year.
Final week in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. Let's get right into the games. We'll start with an out-of-conference matchup. 2-win Delaware State traveled to Tallahassee, Florida to take on the Seminoles. Florida State, having a disappointing season, took out their frustrations on the Hornets. James Blackman threw for 3 touchdowns as the Seminoles destroyed Delaware State 77-6. That's right, folks, a 71-point victory. The Howard Bison took on the Hampton Pirates at Armstrong Stadium in Hampton, Virginia. The Bison were winners of 5 straight and surging in the standings, but 144 yards and 2 touchdowns by Yawkey Johnson helped the Pirates break that streak, winning the contest 20-4. Darian Carter intercepted Kalen Newton late in the fourth quarter to seal the victory for Hampton. Savannah State ends their season on a high note, beating the South Carolina State Bulldogs 34-10. Freshman Devon Gibbons threw for 267 yards and 2 scores as the Tigers defeat the Bulldogs for the first time in 16 years. It was a high-scoring affair at Hughes Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland. Aaron Savage rushed for 2 touchdowns, including the go-ahead score in the fourth quarter, leading Norfolk State past Morgan State 45-32. Jawan Carter threw a 24-yard TD pass to Isaiah Winstead with 2 minutes left to ensure the win for the Spartans. They have now won 11 consecutive games over the Bears. Bethune-Cookman rallies late with a big fourth quarter to get the win over Florida A&M. The Wildcats traveled by 14 points in the fourth when Larry Brim Jr. started the comeback, directing a 9-play, 52-yard drive that ended with his 5-yard TD run. After that, they never looked back, scoring the next 12 points unanswered as they defeated the Rattlers 29-24. And finally, North Carolina A&T completes their perfect season with a 24-10 win over the North Carolina Central Eagles. Lamar Raynard threw for 153 and 1 TD, and Markel Cartwright scored twice as the Aggies win their 9th MEAC title in their first undefeated season. Let's go to the standings. Unbeaten North Carolina A&T wins the title, finishing with a 7th ranking in the FCS. A late push towards the end of the season helps the Howard Bison as they finish 6-2 in the conference. Bethune-Cookman is right behind them with 6 conference wins of their own. North Carolina Central, Hampton, and Norfolk State finish right in the middle of the pack. Savannah State, South Carolina, and Florida A&M are right behind that group, with Delaware State and Morgan State rounding it out. Congratulations go out to the North Carolina A&T Aggies, who win the MEAC title and have a great chance at playing in the Celebration Bowl. I'm Arthur Schneiderman for FCS Conference Whip Around.
The NEC wrapped up its regular season with the first undefeated team in conference play since 2008, as Central Connecticut defeated Robert Morris to move to 6-0, then found out on Sunday it was headed up north in the FCS playoffs. The Blue Devils will ride an 8-game winning streak as they take on the University of New Hampshire, an at-large qualifier out of the Colonial Athletic Association. However, it came out on Tuesday that they will do so without star quarterback Jake Dolegala, as he and center David Sinti were suspended for the UNH game for a violation of team rules. Sophomore Tanner Kingsley, who has attempted 13 passes this season, is expected to start in Dolegala's place. Finishing just behind Central Connecticut in the NEC standings were the Bryant Bulldogs, as they defeated Duquesne 38-29. The Price Wilson to Tom Kennedy connection starred in this one, as they hooked up 9 times for 125 yards and a score. Carter Henderson did all he could on the Duquesne defensive side, as he had a sack and an interception return for a touchdown, and earned himself my NEC Defensive Player of the Week. St. Francis lost an out-of-conference game to Eastern Kentucky, but finished with a 3-3 conference record, and Wagner ended its season well with a 28-15 win at Sacred Heart. Ryan Fultz ended his dominant junior campaign with 26 carries for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns, earning himself my NEC Offensive Player of the Week for the second time this year. Now, Central Connecticut will need to run the ball effectively without Dolegala at quarterback to keep the ball out of Trevor Knight and New Hampshire's 18th-ranked passing offense.
They'll also need Carlton Nash and the rest of the defensive backfield to keep Neil O'Connor in check, as the UNH wide receiver has almost 1,300 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns on the year. And on the offensive side, they'll have to rely on running backs Drew Jean-Guillaume and Cameron Nash. If they can find holes and run the ball effectively, I can see Central Connecticut winning a low-scoring game. But if they try and score with the Wildcats, they could be in trouble. As always, for the FCS Conference Whip-Around, I'm Luke Jackson.
Another season of Patriot League football is in the books. After a long conference schedule, a champion has been decided. Let's get into the action. In their final home game of the year, Fordham beat Bucknell 20-9 on Senior Day. Chase Edmonds rushed for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns in the final game of his collegiate career. This game marked the 6th time this season that Edmonds and quarterback Kevin Anderson did not suit up together in the backfield. Colgate got the win they needed to keep the pressure on Lehigh by beating Georgetown 35-10. They started the game slow by going down 10-0 early, but turned it around quickly and got their offense going to score 35 unanswered points. Raiders freshman quarterback Grant Brenneman threw for 3 touchdowns to finish off a stellar first season in college. Heading into the final game of the week, Lehigh needed a victory to win the 2017 Patriot League title, and they beat Lafayette 38-31 with a huge comeback. Lafayette was leading 31-21 late in the third quarter after C.J. Mills' 96-yard kickoff return touchdown before the comeback started. Then Brad Mays rose to the occasion and threw for 2 touchdowns, and the team added a field goal to give them a 7-point lead that they would hold on to. Mays led the way with 397 yards and 3 touchdowns and earned the game's MVP award. The victory earned the Mountain Hawks their 2nd consecutive conference title. Congratulations. Let's take a look at the final conference standings. Lehigh and Colgate each finished 5-1, but Lehigh won the FCS tournament's automatic bid due to their 41-38 win in the head-to-head matchup back on October 7th. Lehigh earned their league-best 12th Patriot League title, while Colgate's win gives them their 9th title, with 4 of them being shared titles. This year marks the first time the Patriot League title has been shared since 2006. Fordham, Holy Cross, and Lafayette all finished tied for 3rd at 3-3. Bucknell finished 2nd from the bottom at 2-4, and Georgetown finished winless at 0-6. Only one team from the Patriot League qualified for the FCS playoffs, so Lehigh is their only hope. They have a tough matchup in the first round, having to go on the road at Kenneth Laval Stadium to take on number 10 Stony Brook, who finished their regular season with a 9-2 record. The Seawolves needed a last-second score to beat Maine 20-19 in their final matchup of the season, which earned them 2nd place in the CAA and an at-large bid to the tournament. The game begins at 2 p.m. and it can be seen worldwide on ESPN3 and the ESPN app. The only time these two teams faced off, Lehigh beat up Stony Brook 25-2 in the season opener back in 2004. Lehigh might be 5-6, but they've won 5 of their last 6 games, and they look like a team that could make some noise in this tournament. The winner moves on to take on the number 1 seed and defending national champion James Madison on December 2nd. With the FCS Conference Whip-Around, I'm Chris Fichtel.
With the FCS regular season wrapping up this week, there was not too much drama left in the Pioneer League. The conference's lone representative San Diego took care of business beating Marist 35-7, with Daniel Tolbert recording 2 interceptions to earn Defensive Player of the Week honors. Valparaiso defeated Dayton in a low-scoring game 8-7. Morehead State closed out their 2017 campaign with a win over Davidson 21-14. And Drake won convincingly over Jacksonville 52-7. Quarterback Grant Kramer finished with 15 of 18 for 268 and 4 touchdowns, and wide receivers Connor Ostrander and Steven Duran each had over 100 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns in the victory for the Bulldogs. Taking a look at the final standings in the Pioneer League, it's the Toreros on top again, going undefeated in conference play for a 2nd consecutive season. Drake, Campbell, and Jacksonville round out the top 4, with this being the last year for the Camels as they move to the Big South Conference next season. Next week is round 1 of the SCS playoffs, and San Diego will be the lone representative of the Pioneer League. The Toreros will make their 3rd playoff appearance, winning for the first time last year over Cal Poly in the first round. This year opponents will be the Lumberjacks of Northern Arizona, who come into the game with a 7-4 record, going 6-2 in conference play out of the Big Sky. For the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm David Hassagen.
Jacksonville State looks ready for the playoffs. Austin Peay goes into the offseason with something to be peeved about. And Tennessee Tech looks for a new head coach. But first, a look at the final Ohio Valley Conference standings and a quick word about the last week of the regular season. Starting at the bottom, Tennessee Tech got shut out at home by UT Martin last week, 24-0, as Dresser Wynn ran and threw the Golden Eagles defense for 271 total yards and 3 touchdowns, earning himself my OVC Offensive Player of the Week award. The win for UT Martin marks the 12th straight season under Coach Jason Simpson that they have been 500 or better in the OVC. The loss for Tennessee Tech means the second season for Coach Marcus Satterfield would be the last in Cookeville, as he was let go on Monday. One big bright spot this year for the Golden Eagles was Dontez Bird, who, with 27 yards on Saturday, eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark in receiving. Southeast Missouri moved ahead of Murray State with a 21-10 win last Saturday, marking the first time since 2008 that the Redhawks have finished the season on the winning side. The defense was the star in this one, as Kendall Donnerson and Justin Swift combined for 17 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 6 tackles for a loss, and a Defensive Player of the Week award. Eastern Kentucky finished right in the middle of the OVC pack with a 14-10 out-of-conference win over St. Francis. And Jacksonville State readied itself for the FCS playoffs with a 36-6 win over Tennessee State last Thursday, securing the number 3 overall seed in the tournament and assuring itself of at least one home game. Next weekend, they'll face the winner of the Samford-Kennesaw State game. And finally, this past Saturday, on a cold and rainy night in Clarksville, the Austin Peay Governors did all they could to secure an at-large spot in the playoffs with a 28-13 win over Eastern Illinois. However, the committee did not feel as though Austin Peay's 8 FCS wins, 1 FCS loss, and 3 FBS losses were enough to garner a spot and left them as the first team out of the playoffs. Now that should not diminish what a turnaround season it has been for Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year finalist Will Healy and the Governors, as they broke a 29-game losing streak, won 7 OVC games for the first time ever, and scored the most points in program history with 327. And the scary part is, of the 22 players to start the game against Eastern Illinois, 13 are back next year, and 8 are freshmen or sophomores. So Austin Peay's first ever FCS playoff berth is not far off. And for the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm Luke Jackson.
Week 11 is in the books as a lot of offenses showed up. We will recap those games along with looking forward to Week 12 as the playoffs are right around the corner. Jeremiah Briscoe was at it again as he threw for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns as the Bearcats defeated the Wildcats 44-35. Central Arkansas continues to show us why they are the best team in the Southland as they won their game over the Cardinals 56-10. Lamar won their game over Houston Baptist 23-16. Lamar outscored them 21-3 after the first quarter. The Colonels defeated the Lumberjacks 34-13, and the Cowboys relied more on their offense this week as they put up 44 points in a win over the Demons. We look at the FCS stats standings as the Bears remain at the top while the Bearcats and Colonels sit right behind them. With 2 weeks remaining, it looks like a 3-team race. So let's get to next week as we have 2 Thursday night teams as the Panthers take on the Cardinals, while the Colonels take on the Lions, moving on to Saturday where we have 2 4 p.m. games as the Bears look to continue their great season as they go up against the Wildcats. The Lumberjacks take on the Demons, and the night game we have the Cowboys matching up against the Cardinals. But the game I'm looking at is the Bearcats and the Huskies. And I know it's a 9-1 team going up against a 1-9 team, but I'm really liking the play of quarterback Jeremiah Briscoe. Despite throwing 20 less touchdown passes from a year ago, he is still completing 55% of his passes. For the FCS Rip Around, I'm Doug Saravo.
It was a busy weekend in the SoCon as we wrapped up the regular season, with several members playing FBS opponents. Clemson crushed the Citadel 61-3. The Crimson Tide rolled over Mercer 56-0. UNC easily took care of Western Carolina 65-10. And Wofford gave a good account of themselves, losing against South Carolina 31-10. In conference action, the Mocs of Chattanooga ended 2017 on a high note, beating ETSU in a low-scoring affair 10-3. And in the feature game of the week, Samford edged Furman 26-20. Wide receiver Kelvin McKnight earned Player of the Week honors, making 10 catches for 179 yards and a score in the win. Looking at the final standings in the SoCon, Wofford finishes at the top once again. Samford and Furman finished 2-3, and both earned at-large bids for the FCS playoffs, and Western Carolina comes up just short, finishing 4th. Next weekend is the beginning of the FCS playoffs with 2 SoCon teams in action in round 1. Samford will travel to Georgia to take on the winner of the Big South Conference, Kennesaw State, who finished 10-1 on the season with their only loss coming to the Bulldogs in Week 1. Furman will also see a familiar foe in the first round as they travel to take on Elon. The Paladins lost to Elon earlier this season, only losing by a field goal, 34-31. And will look to take down the Phoenix, who finished 8-3 on the year and 3rd in the CAA. Wofford was given the number 7 seed and were given a bye to the second round, where they will face the winner between Elon and Furman. For the SCS Conference Whip Around, I'm David Hassagen.
Week 12 in the SWAC featured 3 conference games and 2 out-of-conference games. Prairie View A&M and Alabama A&M represented the SWAC well with out-of-conference wins against Incarnate Word and Kentucky State. In a low-scoring conference game, Jackson State took down Alcorn State 7-3. Alabama State beat Mississippi Valley State 16-10. And Texas Southern beat Arkansas Pine Bluff 24-10. Looking at the standings, in the East, Alcorn State, Alabama State, and Jackson State sit atop the division, with Alabama A&M and Mississippi Valley State rounding out the bottom. Over to the West, Grambling State, still with a perfect record in conference play, is first in the West. Southern, Prairie View A&M, Texas Southern, and Arkansas Pine Bluff round out the SWAC West standings. Week 13 in the SWAC has 3 games on the schedule for what is the final week of the regular season. Alabama State takes on out-of-conference opponent Edward Waters. Southern U takes on Grambling State in the 44th annual Bayou Classic. That game will be on NBC Sports. Prairie View A&M and Texas Southern go up against each other in the Labor Day Classic. That game was previously postponed due to Hurricane Harvey. And just like that, it's a wrap on the regular season. For the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm Max Bazzone.